Now, moving on from that, this week saw a 10th defeat for the government in the House of Lords over Brexit legislation as peers backed a move aimed at preventing a hard border from being imposed between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Repeated attempts by the Lords have led some to believe that they are really trying to prevent or delay Brexit. Do you think the time is right now to call for the abolition of the House of Lords? And if you think no, they've got to be there to scrutinise. Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think they've overstepped the mark. Time for us to move on to a Senate. Text to 84850. Let me know what you think using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And of course, you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Welcome back. It's a beautiful Sunday. Wonderful weather. What's it going to be like tomorrow? Bank holiday Monday. Always tough in this country to plan, isn't it? You know, you plan a picnic, it rains. So we are going to get, later on in this hour, our weather guru, John Ketley, on to tell us what tomorrow's all about and whether it's going to go on and become a barbecue summer. But first and foremost, the House of Lords. You know, it's there as an amending chamber. It's there to look at government legislation, to correct it, to make suggestions and to send it back. But by convention, what it does not do is to go against the manifesto of the elected government of the day. But over the course of the last week, the government has been suffering repeated defeats over its European Union withdrawal bill, leading some to think and comment that actually it's really gone beyond its remit, given that the Conservatives and the SNP were both elected saying we should leave the single market and the customs union. And maybe the biggest criticism is that the Lords, the majority in the Lords, do not see us walking away from Brexit talks as being an option at all. And some of us, myself included, think that in any negotiation you have to be able to have that threat to get anything. So I wanted to find out, what is the motivation, what is the thinking behind the prime movers in the House of Lords, behind their actions this week, and ultimately, you know, have they gone so far that it will now lead to very serious calls for the abolition of the House of Lords and its replacement with an elected Senate? Because I think that's where the debate's going. Well, just before I came on air this morning, I spoke to Lord William Wallace of Saltaire. He's a Lib Dem peer, and I started off by asking him whether the House of Lords had really stepped over the line.
No, I mean, we're the second chamber, not an ideal second chamber. I'm in favour of an elected House of Lords, but we have to work with what we've got. And it's our job to ask detailed questions of where the government's going and if it's got it right and if it knows the detail. And there's an awful lot of detail in the question of leaving the European Union. The referendum asked a very simple question, but the answer is extremely complicated, and that's what we're looking at.
But tradition has it that the House of Lords does not challenge the government on legislation upon which it was elected, and we have the Conservatives, albeit not with an outright majority, but by far the biggest party, in an alliance with the DUP, and in their election manifestos last June, they both promised that we would leave the customs union and leave the single market. And it seems to me that your votes rather go against those manifestos.
We're not challenging the legislation as such. We accept that we seem to be going to leave if the government can sort out how we're going to leave and what we're going to leave. But as I'm sure you recognise, Nigel, the government has so far failed to agree what sort of future relationship with the European Union it has. It has these two ideas for some sort of customs arrangement, and it paid £700,000 to McKinsey's to invent one of them. They're both unworkable. And we are entitled as the second chamber to say, do you know where you're going? Does what you propose work? And if it doesn't, think again. That's what we're doing.
But one of the problems here is that in any business negotiation, and in effect, you know, we can look at, and by the way, I do agree with you that 23 months on from the referendum, for the government not to be clear about its customs union position is somewhat ridiculous. So there we will agree on this Sunday morning. But in any business negotiation, the one thing the other side has to know is that you are prepared to get up and walk away. And do you not agree that your amendments that you've sent back to the House of Commons try to stop the elected government of the day from having that its strongest card?
No. And I mean, one of the things that's going on at the present moment, and as we look at a whole host of implications, like, are we going to leave the European aviation arrangements under which British planes and others fly within a common European space? It gets a bit crowded if we leave it. So there are lots and lots of questions like that. We send these things back to the House of Commons, and they reconsider them. And the government's biggest worry at the present moment is that when they go back to the Commons, a lot of MPs there will say, actually, I think the Lords are right. Or if you can't explain what you mean by this, maybe we shouldn't let you do it. You know as well as I do also in business that when business takes a decision, it doesn't just say, right, we're going to do this come what may, and it doesn't matter what we discover when we look through the books. And now looking through the books, we're now asking the government where it's going and where the national interest is. I was very interested to see Justin Greening quoted in the Times yesterday to say, we've all got to think about the national interest in this because we have a very divided country and we want what's best for Britain, and that's what we're doing.
But no deal could in fact be the best deal, and yet the House of Lords is saying that no deal is not an option. I put it to you again, you are trying to bind the government's hands in these negotiations.
Well, if the government knew what it was doing and was explaining some of its objectives to Parliament, life would be easier for all of us. I don't accept that no deal is better than any deal. And if you listen to what the Prime Minister has been saying, Mrs May's last two speeches, she talks about the importance of our future close relationship with the European Union. That's not asking for no deal, it's asking for a carefully negotiated deal. It's only the Jacob Rees-Moggs of this world who are saying we want no deal.
Well, there may be a few million voters out there, Brexit voters, who feel the same way too. But, I mean, if, and yeah, there's lots of detail, but if at 11 p.m, on the 29th of March next year, we do, Article 50 runs out and we've left the European Union, can this country, in your opinion, be successful outside the European Union?
Well, we'll be poorer. We'll be stuck with a lot of food going rotten because it takes time to get it across the channel inside. We'll have lost... There are 1,000 British customs officers working across the channel at the present moment. You can't manage borders without cooperation with the people on the other side. So we'll find some of the Japanese car companies in Britain deciding not to invest here in the future, so people in the north of England will lose jobs. We'll survive, but we'll be a lot poorer, and the sort of fantasies which Liam Fox is pursuing of, we'll have a wonderful free trade deal with China, we'll have a wonderful free trade deal with India because the Indians are so grateful for the fact that we governed them for 200 years. That's nonsense.
And finally, when it comes to it, there may well be an amendment in the House of Lords to opt for a second referendum. Will you be supporting that when it comes?
I think, given the mess we're in, and you and I agree, given the incompetence of the government, unable to agree on some of the most important aspects of our future relationship, there is an argument that when it comes to the patched-up agreement that we're likely to end up getting at the last minute, this should be put to the people. And that's actually what a very large number of people, a majority, are now saying. I think people like you would probably say, Nigel, it's too important just to allow Parliament to decide on it.
So we have a referendum. Do you accept the government's deal, or do we just leave without a deal? Would that be the referendum?
Not necessarily. Parliament will have to decide on what the case is. We are a parliamentary democracy, and Parliament is there to check the government and think about the national interest.
Well, that was Lord Wallace of Saltaire, Liberal Democrat peer, one of 104 Liberal Democrat peers. I have to say I'm very opposed to the House of Lords in its current form. Over 500 of Blair and Cameron's mates have been put in there. I don't think it's representative of the country at all. And in this case on Brexit, I think it's going above and beyond its constitutional duty. Not happy with it. Quick word from Sam in Stoke-on-Trent. Good morning, Sam.
Morning, Nigel. Pleased to speak to you again.
So I think the Lords needs to go. What do you think?
I think that they're just shining a light on the reason why we need reform, and I think they do it. I think, like I heard Ian Duncan Smith say, surgeon, Dr. Cure yourself. I think that they're making people like me very angry. They're coming across as very privileged, elite, condescending, patronising, and using procedure and word games, and we see right through it. And all this negativity, we can't. I'll tell you what, Nigel, you know, you've been in business, sack them. Get people who can. Get people who've got a can-do attitude.
I agree. All this we can't do, and the food's going to be rotting at Dover, and it's also negative, isn't it?
Yeah, we can jump ship. But I tell you what, they just think they know better. You know what I mean? They think it's the best thing since sliced bread, because they hopefully think they're going to, like you said, get a job, or I don't know what, but they're just absolutely detached from the public, and it makes me livid that they try and say they're doing it for the people. They're not doing it for the people.
Do you know what, Sam? All of those things you've just said, I am going to put them to another member of the House of Lords. Lord Lamont of Lerwick, the former Conservative Chancellor of this country, is going to be on talking to us about the House of Lords in a minute. Well, we've listened to Lord Wallace of Saltaire, one of the prime movers behind a series of defeats that the government has suffered to its European Union bill in the House of Lords, and I have to say, there's a fascinating response coming in, and joining me to listen to that response and give his own view is Lord Lamont of Lerwick, former Conservative Chancellor and member of the House of Lords. Good morning, Lord Lamont.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. I have to say that on this question of the government receiving a series of defeats, it's kind of leading to a broader debate. We've listened to Lord Wallace of Saltaire. Before I ask you a couple of questions, just listen for a second, if you would, to what I'm getting coming in on text and on tweet. Nigel, I'm sick of the Lords making excuses for their decisions. It's obvious they're voting for their own agenda, says Stephen Croydon. He says, Nigel, now you're talking. Get rid of the unelected House of Lords. Replace them with a Senate. Keep the government honest. Mike in sunny Cornwall. And one here from Dave, who sends me a text. He says, it's about time we got rid of the House of Lords. They turn up, get their 300 quid a day, go to the bar, have dinner, have a snooze in the afternoon, and say the occasional hear, hear. Is that an accurate reflection of the House of Lords, or is Dave being unfair?
That's a little bit unfair, but I'm not at all surprised at the comment, because I think the House of Lords is in danger of overstepping the mark.
Yep.
The function of the House of Lords is to revise, improve, amend legislation. It's not to drive a coach and horses through the legislation. And some of the amendments that have been carried, such as saying the House of Lords after both houses of Parliament after a certain stage should take charge of the negotiations and direct the government, something that's never happened in all history. Treaties are not negotiated by Parliament, they're negotiated by government. This is overstepping the mark, and I think it calls into question the validity of the arguments, which in the past I've always supported for an appointed House, but I've written that even I think that by overstepping the mark, they're calling into question the very justification for the House of Lords.
Yeah, and they do appear, of course, to be giving succour to some of the rebels in Westminster, those that actually want to stop Brexit from happening. I mean, do they realise, do people like Lord Wallace and others, do they actually realise just how angry the Brexit voting public is about this?
I don't think they do, and I have said that if Brexit is destroyed by Parliament and descends into chaos, there will be an enormous backlash, an enormous awakening of bitterness. It would go far beyond calling for the abolition of the House of Lords. It would be a real profound disgust with politics.
Yes, I mean, clearly.
I've always, this question of a second referendum, I've always said, yes, we can have a second referendum after we've left and seen what leaving is like. Nothing can't be reversed, but you can actually, what you've got to do is implement the decision, obey the decision of the electorate, leave the EU. If in 10 years' time someone wants to rejoin, let them argue then.
And what is the government now going to do? I mean, let us say that the House of Lords continues on its current obstructionist path. Does the Prime Minister have the option of appointing, say, 500 new peers to make sure that she can get her legislation through?
I think that would look pretty ridiculous, appointing 200 peers, let us say. What one has to hope is that among those who voted for the amendments, and there are some, and I know some, they will say we're entitled to, this would be the basis of Lord Wallace's argument, we're entitled to ask the House of Commons to think again, but we might do that once, we might do it twice, but we can't go on. In the end, we have to give way because the House is elected. Good sense would indicate that's what they ought to do.
Yes, I mean, ultimately...
And I think it's possible that will be the position of the Labour Party. The Labour Party is a bit split. I think the official position is not to obstruct, but they've got an awful lot of people who are very pro the EU, and they can't entirely control them.
I also wonder, I have to say, that whether part of the problem here, with the Lords flexing their muscles in the way that they are, is perhaps a lack of leadership on the Brexit process in this country. Now, you are a Conservative peer, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, pro-Brexit supporter and campaigner. But, we're now 23, I put it to you, we're 23 months on from a referendum in which it was absolutely clear to everybody that if we voted to leave, we were leaving the customs union, we were leaving the single market. Isn't it a lack of leadership that 23 months on we have a Brexit War Cabinet meeting this week at which they're still discussing what our approach to the customs union is?
Well, it's easy to say lack of leadership, but there are different views about how you leave. There are a small minority of Conservative MPs who hold hardline views about remaining within the customs union. I think they're wrong. I think, as you say, it's inconsistent with the referendum. But the leadership of the party, if you just expel these people or take the party whip away from them, then you'll just lose the vote. I think the Prime Minister is between Scylla and Charybdis in a very, very, very difficult place.
Yeah, and finally, Lord Lamont,
Can I just say one thing? I mean,
sure.
I think, on the House of Lords, I think what is sort of depressing to me about it is that it's just so out of line with public opinion. All right, the referendum result was just narrow by 2% or so, but it's a massive Remain majority in the House of Lords. That is what depresses me. You have 100 Liberals and no Nigel Farage.
No,
Nigel Farage. We need you there.
No, I'd certainly do the catering facilities and bars a lot of good if I was there. But I'm not going to be there in a hurry. I don't think. And finally,
I think you should be there.
Well, that's very sweet of you. Thank you. But no doubt, if I do ever get there, they'll abolish it quickly anyway. But the 29th of March. 11 p.m. on the 29th of March is not very far away. And that is the moment at which we are due to make the big historic break from the Treaty of Rome and what's come since it. Are you still optimistic that we're on track to do that and actually to leave whatever the terms may be?
I believe we will exit on the 29th of March. There will be some details still being negotiated in the so-called transitional, so-called implementation period, but we all know there's some further detail in that. But I believe it will happen. I think once this withdrawal bill is through Parliament, which I hope it will get through, I think the government will be in a stronger position then. And I think after exit day, I think the process will be irreversible.
Lord Lamont, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Well, we've had two members of the House of Lords there, two very different points of view. The Liberal Democrat peer, Lord Wallace, believing that the House of Lords is right to be doing what it's doing to the government's Brexit legislation, and Lord Lamont there making it pretty clear that unless the House of Lords is careful, calls for its abolition will grow. I think they've grown already, though. Steve says to me, I'm quite happy with the House of Lords and glad they are taking these steps. So not every member of the public wants the Lords gone. No, I didn't suggest they did, Steve, but I do think, forget whether you're Brexit or Remain, if you can for a moment here. I just think generally, for hundreds of peers that have been appointed, I mean, I'm not sure Henry VIII had the powers of patronage that Blair and Cameron have exercised when it comes to putting people in the House of Lords. I wonder, had Remain won, would the Lords have been quite so keen to look out for the good of the people? Asked Polly. Yeah, well, good question. Why can't people understand that it's the EU that's blocking any agreements? No wonder the government is getting nowhere, says Ruth. Ruth, that's why, Michel Barnier, or Barrier, as perhaps we should call him in these negotiations, you need, when you're dealing with these people, the threat that you're going to walk away. and then it's going to be jolly difficult for BMW to sell their motor cars at a good price, or the French wine producers to sell their bottles of booze. You need to have the threat of walking away. What the House of Lords is trying to do is remove that option from the government. Terry is calling from Cobham. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Nigel. Nigel, apart from Brexit, we leave that for a second, as you just said. I'm 67 years of age, sprightly, if you like. And for years, like many people, for decades, I thought, what a waste of time, the House of Lords. You know, the £300 a day, the bottle of wine, the cheap port. And it was just like, as I've got older, it's logical that you need another tier of people who are wiser, I think, not all of them, but wiser, worldly, live things, and a more mature age. So I think we do need them. Forget the £300 and the cheap bottle of wine. I think we do need them.
Yeah, I mean, Terry, would you be tempted with a cheap bottle of wine and the 300 quid a day?
No.
No, all right, fine. No. You had to think about that.
I'd rather stay in Cobham with a better bottle of wine. But they're needed, though, Nigel, and I think they do play a part. You know, they don't all fall asleep. You know, they're very intelligent men and all that, and you just need people like that. You can't just abolish people like that.
Terry, the idea that we have a revising chamber, absolutely, I do agree in the bicameral system. I think it's absolutely right. The question is the way it's currently constituted the right way to do that? And I worry that it is now so reflective of the London career political class that it's not. People say to me, Terry, reform it. But, hey, Blair did reform it. We've had the major reform. And I'm beginning to think, Terry, that an elected Senate is the only way forward for this, though I do accept that could lose us some expertise in life. But couldn't you make that up in various committees anyway?
Well, I mean, I don't completely know everything about it, but I think it's a very important thing. There must be useless people, like there are so many useless MPs in MPs, is a joke. But there must be people, but there must be some lords who are there are knowledgeable, clever, shrewd, and things. You know, and you need, Nigel, we all need people like that. You know, we all need people like that.
I tell you what, Terry, if they were to behave during this Brexit process as if they were wise people trying to be helpful, that may be a good thing, but they're behaving Terry, like obstructionists. Have a great Sunday, Terry. Thank you. And I get by text. So, the unelected body in London is doing the very, very best they can to stop us moving away from the unelected body in Brussels. That's a pretty fair point, isn't it, really? Important though the role is of the House of Lords in the Brexit process, and one hell of a row going on, and many of you thinking, actually, their lordship's house, it's time they were now got rid of. I have a feeling that many of you at breakfast this morning were not discussing House of Lords reform. No, you were talking about the weather, weren't you? Because it has been astonishing. I had the day off yesterday. I was out in the English Channel. It was like the Mediterranean. I got back, as I said earlier, to the local supermarket to buy some charcoal. Virtually had to fight somebody off to get a bag of it. And we all love good weather. This May Day bank holiday that we're having tomorrow, this holiday first came in back in 1978, so this is the 40 years now that we've had this bank holiday weekend. I can always remember it being rainy and miserable and horrible and ghastly, but it appears it's going to be really rather good. So to put this in some sense of perspective, let's get weather guru John Ketley on the line. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning to you, Nigel.
So, over the course of these 40 years, is this the best bank holiday weekend ever?
Yeah, without a question. I've got to say, I've been looking back at the records. You've stolen my thunder. Oh, shouldn't say that, really, should I?
Well, that was the next question, actually, but go on. Yeah.
Yes, you're quite right. It kicked in 1978, and for the first 20 years, it was absolute rubbish. It was often cold, it was often cloudy, and it was often raining. But since the turn of the century, really, things have improved considerably. The warmest I can find was 2008, when the temperature reached 23 degrees in London, for example. That was the highest. And again, 2013, 22 degrees in central London. So it's very rare to get above 20 degrees, and this year we're certainly going to break the record because we got the 23 degrees in many places yesterday, and it's going to be 25, 26 today, and probably a little bit more for tomorrow. Wow. So you're looking at 27, maybe even a 28 somewhere tomorrow afternoon.
And this settled weather, I mean, you know, tomorrow people are making plans. They're going to be going out picnicking. Yeah. Do they need to take umbrellas with them, or can you guarantee them that it won't rain?
Well, you know, I can virtually guarantee. It isn't the same everywhere.
Guarantee.
Yeah, virtually. It isn't the same absolutely everywhere, because anybody who's listening around the western and northern fringes of Scotland, there's There's a fair bit of cloud and cool weather there. There's some spots of rain about, little splashes of rain, and there's even some sea fog off the Cornish coast as well. Then at Bude I can see it's very difficult to see out into the water. So there are problems out on the western coast with this sea fog. But generally speaking, I think the cold weather that's coming back later in the week, or cooler weather I should say, and more unsettled conditions is going to hold off really for most of us until till Wednesday. But I think on Tuesday there will be some wetter weather coming in across Scotland and into the Irish Sea.
Okay, and a few weeks ago you predicted not the beast from the east, but the mini beast from the east, and we heard it here first. And I asked you then, I'm going to ask you again, is it going to be a barbecue summer, John Ketley?
Yes, you did ask me that, Nigel, and I'm sure at different parts of the summer there will be some barbecue weather. Can I give you a little hint? I've got my barbecue out today. I got the coals in early because I knew it was coming, obviously, as you would know.
Of course.
So it never catches me out, but I have been seen out in a barbecue in the rain, but just, isolated, localised thunderstorms, that's what they are. But at the moment you can't say at all, as obviously summer's still a long way off,
of course.
For 3 or 4 months you cannot predict which is the best part of the summer. But as we said last time, I think Wimbledon fortnight into early July could be a good pinpoint.
Terrific. John Ketley, have a great day. Thank you very much indeed. Well, there we are. It is the best ever bank holiday weather we've experienced in this country since this holiday came in 1978. So please, please enjoy it. Right, let's get back to the callers. Susan is calling from Callington in Cornwall. Have the House of Lords overstepped the mark here, Susan? Is it time we replace them with an elected House?
Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Not only do I think the House of Lords, as it is, should be ended, I think I'd like to see the Houses of Parliament, well, not the House of Parliament itself, move to the Midlands, so it's no longer London-centric.
Well, there's an argument against that, Susan, which is this. The European Parliament once a month goes to Strasbourg. Strasbourg, by the way, a beautiful city on the Rhine, a city with a very heavily Franco-German contested history, and it goes there for symbolic reasons, but there are no direct air flights there from many parts of Europe, and it's a nightmare. And I suspect that if you move the Houses of Parliament to Birmingham, you would find that members of Parliament from far-flung parts of the United Kingdom would find it a lot more difficult to get to Birmingham rather than London, where the greatest number can most quickly get to and from their constituencies.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah. I think that part of it.
My worry is not that the Commons is in London, it's not that the Second Chamber is in London, it's that most of the people in the Second Chamber, most of the people, Susan, in the House of Lords, live in London, work in London. I'm not sure many of them actually get beyond the M25.
Well, absolutely. I agree with Lord Lamont. I think you should be there to redress the balance.
Well, there are some that say I've already gone and upset and corrupted one parliament, and why not go and do it to another? But I don't, Susan. I am not. Given the appointment system in this country, I'm not going to be in the House of Lords anytime soon. I don't really think I want to be, frankly. But Susan, if we have an elected second chamber, the trouble is to make sure that it still does a role of revision, rather than flexing its muscles to stop the government. That is the challenge, I think, of an elected second house.
Perhaps it should come from the business sector more than anything.
Well, at the moment, we have, of course, bishops in the House of Lords and all sorts of people from a huge... the idea was the Lords would be made up of people from all different walks of life, sports people, business people, charities sector, trade unions, etc. But I'm afraid that under Cameron and under Blair, it's all become a little bit too samey. And on the Brexit point, do you think there is actually a plot amongst people in the House of Lords to stop Brexit, Susan?
Yeah, I certainly do. Of course there is, yeah.
And does that make you angry?
Furious.
Furious.
I think I'd like to see UKIP run with the idea of ending the House of Lords, because it would be so popular.
I think you may be right. I really do. Susan, I thank you very much indeed. Tina on Facebook says, the referendum has exposed our political elite and where their loyalties lie. Unfortunately, it is not with the British institution that they represent. Shameful. Nick is calling from Solihull. Good morning, Nick.
Hello, Nigel. It's great to speak to you. But my opinion, first of all, is that it's the cosy cabal of Remainers in the House of Lords. These people are unelected. They're not elected people. The Prime Minister, when they finish the term, she appoints certain people in the cabinet or outside of the cabinet to the House of Lords, which basically it's a department of washed-up politicians, basically, on a nice little cosy £300 a day. And some of the reasons why the people in the House of Lords are trying to block Brexit. I mean, when we got people like Mandelson, Kinnock and Prescott, you've got Mandelson who's on £35,000 a year pension, Kinnock's on £90,000, Prescott, one of the two chins and tonic Prescott, who was always an advocate of getting rid of the House of Lords.
So was Neil Kinnock.
Oh, Kinnock was one of the worst. His family are all linked to the EC, aren't they, with all nice little pensions. And bearing in mind as well, there are lots of lords who are actually have pensions from the EU. So, one of the conditions...
And they never declare it, Nick.
No, they don't.
They never, when they get up to speak on the European Union subject, they never declare that interest. Nick, you're clearly done with the House of Lords. The question is, how do we replace it with an elected body and still keep it as a revising chamber rather than one that's going to start to challenge the supremacy of the House of Commons?
Well, as you say, they should be elected. So something like a Privy Council, that type of thing, of people who are very learned people, and should be there should be a committee which appoints people with suitable business acumen, suitable political sort of unbiased views, and elect them in that capacity.
I tell you what, Nick. Getting people with unbiased views in any walk of life is not the easiest thing to do because we all have our opinions. But, Nick, you clearly are finished with it. You think they're overpaid, washed-up politicians. And you know what? In the main, they are. How is it the Liberal Democrats have got 104 peers? I find that absolutely extraordinary. Nigel, there ought to be a rule that no ex-politician should be a Lord. Under its current setup, it's pretty impossible for that not to be the case. What is for certain over Brexit is I think they're behaving very badly. Lord Lamont makes the point that never before in history have the House of Lords tried to bind a government's hands that is in the course of an international negotiation. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. As the Lords inflict defeats on the government over the European Union withdrawal bill, I'm asking the question, is it now time to abolish the House of Lords? And I can't see any other logical thing to do, given how badly wrong Blair's reforms have gone. Don't forget, the House of Lords was going to be much more suitable to modern Britain, and it's become nothing of the kind. Meanwhile, London crime. It's an issue over which Donald Trump has been attacked over the weekend. He talked about a London hospital being like an Afghan war zone in response to a doctor from this country having said it before. But overnight, more bad news. A 17-year-old boy has died after being inflicted with gunshot wounds in South London in Southwark early yesterday evening. And overnight, 3 more people rushed to hospital after a suspected acid attack in East London this morning. This story of mounting violent crime in London not going away soon. Back to the House of Lords. Paul in Bromley, what is your opinion on this? Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Hi, Nigel. Nice to thank you.
Yes, okay. So what do you think, Paul?
Yeah. I think we should keep the vote, and I mean it's really, really dangerous to start this argument, getting rid of the Lord. We end up getting rid of the Queen, and this is the history of Britain. This is why we're a great nation, We do things like that. We have to have people to scrutinize us, and looking at the Windrush scandals and everything. I mean, if we don't have those people, wise people to have to scrutinize what we're doing, we end up in very, very big troubles. I'm a young person, and I fully support the Queen. I fully support the Lord. And I think And I think if we going through what you start doing, we'll get rid of the Queen.
Paul, there is no prospect of us getting rid of the Queen. Certainly not the Queen, and not even the monarchy. I don't believe that for a moment. Although, if people thought that the monarch was abusing their constitutional position, you would start to hear more Republican voices. The point, Paul, is twofold here. One, that the House of Lords, in rejecting large sections of the government's European Union withdrawal bill policy, are overstepping the mark. The second point, Paul, is you talk about it as a piece of the history of this country. That is true. But Tony Blair in 1999 got rid of nearly all of the historic peers, bar 92. And, Paul, what they've done is they've stuffed the place with their mates and their party donors. You know, I mean, Blair appointed 357 members of the House of Lords, and David Cameron appointed 242, 40 per year that he was in office. And what I'm saying, Paul, is because of the behaviour of Blair and Cameron, it's lost in its current shape all credibility.
If that's what you're saying, I mean, it's getting more sense to me. But getting rid of the whole thing, you can actually revise it. You can make some changes. But I don't think, it's a wise idea to try to get rid of it. It's just wrong.
Well, what I would do,
that's
Paul.
My point of view.
Okay, what I would do, Paul. Okay, just hear me through. I'm not for one moment suggesting that we get rid of a revising chamber. I can see the benefit in that.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
And I wouldn't get rid of the building, or the history, or the role. I just think perhaps it needs to become a Senate, which perhaps would be more reflective of 21st century Britain.
Okay, I mean, the way, but we need to have some sort of scrutinizing.
Absolutely. No, Paul, absolutely, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, no.
I heard about people talking and become like we have to get rid of it. This is really wrong.
Okay. No, that's clarified the argument for everybody. Paul from Bromley, thank you very much indeed. Many people in the Lords, I'm told, have years of experience in politics. They're okay, says Jackie from Watford. Well, that would be fine. Be nice if they had different points of view. It seems they've all got the same view on Brexit. At least many of them have. How many Lords receive subsidies from the European Union to maintain their huge estates when some people struggle in this country? Ed. Well, Ed, of course, that's, you can go back to the Corn Laws debate of the 1840s and find that very often in this country, the great divide when it comes to change are the landowning classes against the small business and entrepreneurial classes. And Brexit in many ways reflects that great tradition. But you're quite right. Many, many people in the House of Lords who will be receiving EU subsidies, though to be fair, there would have been even more of them before the 1999 reform. Let's go to Anne in Boston in Lincolnshire. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning, Nigel. I'd just like to say about the House of Lords, there was a year or so ago, they had a great big meeting in there, and I was horrified to find they all rebelled over something or other, I can't remember, but I was horrified to find there was about 800 to 900 of them.
Oh, yes.
And I couldn't believe it, so I wrote to the Prime Minister and told her that we should have no more than 60. And 60? They can be made up of whoever, wants to vote for them. And it should be £50 a day. And that's sufficient for their expenses. So they can be there to legislate or read under the legislation.
I don't think 50 quid a day works, Anne. I mean, you might live in Swindon, for argument's sake, and be commuting into the House of Lords 2 or 3 days a week. So I'm not sure 50 quid a day works, but your general point...
They don't have to attend, do they? They don't have to go.
No,
so
but if...
Only those that really want to be there will be there for £50 a day, and therefore we'll have only about 60 of them. And after all, they're all rich. They don't need the money anyway.
A lot of them are rich, Anne. I'm sure there are some Labour, Tory, crossbench peers listening to this who aren't rich at all. So it's a bit of everything. But no, the general point. So Anne, you think by removing financial incentives, that will reduce the number that turn up. But would you find it more attractive, Anne, to think of having a Senate where maybe you elected people and they serve just one 15-year term?
I don't really understand the word Senate, so I'll just say that...
Well, elected House.
Elected House, definitely, but say 60 of them or 100, whatever.
Yeah, well, I would say about 100 would probably be about the right number if we...
£50 a day, as I say, anybody that's objected to that just doesn't need to go there.
No. OK, Anne, thank you. And one of the problems, of course, with this is that if you do elect people to the House of Lords, / Senate, or call it what you will then have to start paying them salaries. These peers are not paid salaries. They are paid a daily turn-up allowance. Now, clearly some people have abused that. You know, turn up, sign on, disappear. That has been happening on quite a large scale. And it is true that the bars and restaurants do, you know, sell food and drink at extremely good prices. I've been for lunch there many times. And it's actually, I mean, it is like a club. It's really like a sort of club just full of old folks, you know, and that's what it is. And I guess if you're a member of it, and you haven't got to travel a huge distance to come to it, it's a very lovely club to be a member of. But is it representative of society? Is it fit for purpose in 21st century Britain? And I say it's not, even before their attempt to collude with many to stop Brexit from happening. So I do feel quite strongly about it. Peter is calling from Wimbledon. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Nigel. Nigel, I suppose you wouldn't be talking about this if you had some of your donors and mates in the House of Lords. The reason, because you never were elected to be a member of Parliament, probably that's one of the reasons why you haven't got anyone in there. And one of the other reasons were, to be honest...
Well, no, Peter. I mean, Peter, I have, of course, pointed out that it's gross that there are 104 Liberal Democrat peers and not one UKIP peer. I mean, there are 3 that sit there as UKIP who came from the Conservatives, but not one ever been appointed to UKIP, despite it being, you know, beating the Liberal Democrats in several elections. But hey, this is not about UKIP. It's certainly not about me. It is about whether, because of the powers of patronage, a place that has been filled up with 500 of Blair and Cameron's mates is fit for purpose.
Well, Nigel, I mean, just honestly, put your hand on heart and tell us, are you going to give up your European Union pension? And are you going to give back the money the way you're not attending Fisherman Committee? You've been such a...
Oh, no, Peter. Had I attended, I'd have been paid to attend. Because I didn't attend, I wasn't paid, all right? So get that very clear. I saved the taxpayers' money. And had that committee had legislative power, I'd have gone to it. When I found out it was a waste of time, I didn't bother. Peter, you know, why is it of the 22,000 people, right, 22,000 people who are entitled to EU pensions of varying degrees, the only one you're bothered about is mine?
Well, because you're the one just talking about this, about other people in the House of Lords receiving EU pension, and you forget to mention yourself. You know, if you're the ones who advocate so strongly against unelected people in the EU and so on, like as you say, because you see, Nigel, the problem is you are a liar and a con man, and a lot of people fell for it.
Well, I tell you what, if I'm a con man, Peter, I'm a bloody good one, aren't I?
Would like me to explain to you why?
You do, go on.
Never once I've heard you, before the referendum, talking about real issues, you know. The referendum was a black and white issue.
So you've never, Peter, you've never heard me talk about grammar schools, no?
No, I've heard you talking about Syrian refugees which have absolutely nothing to do with the membership of the EU. You stood about that shameful poster, yeah, saying we are...
Well, you're quite right, Peter. Peter, you're quite right. I was the first politician in Britain to suggest that we should take some Syrian refugees at a time when everybody else ran away from the issue, and I have particularly said that for Christians in Syria and other parts of the Middle East, life has become increasingly bleak, and I think we should have taken some Syrian Christian refugees, but hey, no one listened. Peter, have a lovely Sunday too. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC.